From fairy tale beginnings to tragedy, Diana, Princess of Wales, is dead. And with her, millionaire playboy and new boyfriend, Dodi Fayed, killed in a high-speed car crash in Paris. Good evening. Diana, Princess of Wales, is dead. She was killed in a car crash in Paris. Her boyfriend, Harrods heir Dodi Fayed, is also dead. The couple were being chased by photographers when their car flipped in a tunnel and smashed into a wall in the west of the city.
This is the image the world had come to know of Diana, the fresh-faced Queen of Hearts, a year after her divorce, having thrown herself into her charity work. But this is the wreckage the world woke to. The news from the scene was impossible to believe.
But it appears to be official. Princess Diana, at the age of 36, has died of massive internal injuries she suffered in a car accident along with her companion Dodi Al-Fayed.
The 36-year-old princess suffered massive internal injuries when the car flipped and smashed into a wall in a motorway tunnel. She was trapped for 2 hours, then taken to hospital, where she suffered a lung hemorrhage and a heart attack.
The Queen and the Prince of Wales and the Prime Minister have been informed of the accident and of the death of the Princess of Wales.
French surgeons said there was nothing they could do. Diana was in the back of the car with her new boyfriend, Dodi Fayed. He died on impact. They were returning to their hotel after dinner. Also in the vehicle, the driver and a bodyguard. They were trying to evade the paparazzi when the crash occurred.
What can you tell us about whether any other vehicles were involved or any motorcycles?
No, I didn't see any other cars crash. It looked like he hit the wall. It was 4 people in the car.
Police have questioned 5 photographers and confiscated 3 motorcycles from the accident scene. They're expected to lay charges. Prince Charles has been on holiday in Scotland with the couple's children William and Harry. They've been told of the accident. The boys were due to be reunited with their mother in London today. There's worldwide shock at the news, with tributes already for the world's most photographed woman. Messages of sympathy have arrived from Australia and the United States, and the Queen and British Prime Minister Tony Blair both described the princess's death as an appalling and unnecessary tragedy. The behaviour of photographers who have hounded Diana for years is now under investigation. In London, Neil Warren, 7 Nightly News.
And the world is shocked by the death of the 36-year-old princess who brought so much joy to millions of people. She was the world's most photographed woman who preferred to be known as Britain's Queen of Hearts. She leaves behind her sons, William and Harry.
She came to us as Diana Spencer, the shy young kindergarten teacher who stole the heart of a prince. The royal wedding was something out of a storybook. 1 billion people watching on television, 600,000 Britons lining the streets. The prince and his bride living the fairy tale. Each page of the story bringing more happiness. Soon came a new heir to the throne, Prince William, then his brother, Prince Harry. But this royal couple didn't live happily ever after. The next chapters were written in British tabloids. Headlines publicly airing the misery of a broken marriage. For Diana, tales of bulimia and anorexia, and a royal family intent on driving her out of the palace. Finally speaking of her heartache in a lengthy interview.
And I seem to be on the front of a newspaper every single day, which is an isolating experience. And the higher the media place you, is the bigger the drop.
Diana again put her faith in a man, Major James Hewitt, only to be let down.
Yes, I adored him. Yes, I was in love with him. But I was very let down.
But this was said to be the new beginning. The romance with the millionaire Dodi Fayed, the son of the owner of the exclusive London store Harrods. Photos of their holiday in the Mediterranean showing a couple openly affectionate. Diana's sons sharing in her newfound happiness. But the smiles of the new lovers masked another heartache. Dodi's jilted ex-fiancée Kelly Fisher devastated. Dodi Fayed left a string of broken hearts, the 41-year-old film producer, flaunting his playboy status. If Diana had any doubts, they were dispelled with a visit to her personal psychic. We won't know the future she foretold, but for the princess, happiness was always to elude her. Princess Diana, dead at 36.
And our 7 correspondent Stan Grant is in London at Kensington Palace, Princess Diana's home. Well, Stan, it's early Sunday morning there. Britons are just waking up now to this tragic news of Diana's death. What's been their reaction so far?
Well, Ross, you're right there. It is early in the morning, but already we're seeing stirrings on the street. And all the people here are having much the same reaction that we've all had, that horrible, sinking, hollow feeling when we heard the news of Princess Diana's death. Already we've seen outpourings of grief here. We've seen people openly distraught, crying along the streets outside Kensington Palace. And just up behind me here, Ross, people have been laying wreaths and flowers, as they're going to do throughout the day, as Kensington Palace becomes a bit of a shrine to Princess Diana.
Stan, do you think that this is going to have an effect on the public attitude to the tabloid press? They've really hounded celebrities, particularly Diana, haven't they?
Well, Ross, you're right there. Of course, Princess Diana has spoken in the past of just how intolerable that pressure had become at times, and it did contribute to the breakdown of her marriage to Prince Charles. It's dogged her ever since, and in fact we heard overnight that she and Dodi Fayed were trying to evade the paparazzi when they had that horrible car crash. We've heard this morning of abuse being hurled at media at Buckingham Palace, not far from here, and people have driven past here throughout the day abusing us here as well. I suppose all I can say is that we are all diminished in some way by this tragedy, and certainly the tabloid press was never held in high regard, perhaps even lower now.
Sure. OK, Stan Grant, thank you very much, and keep us in touch. Prime Minister John Howard has expressed sympathy on behalf of all Australians to the royal family, particularly Princes William and Harry. Diana had been a regular visitor to our shores, her charity and friendliness earning her a special place in the hearts of many Australians.
There was a connection between the Princess and the people of Australia that went way beyond the official engagements. We, as a people, loved having her here.
Princess Di, welcome to Australia!
An affection she repaid at every opportunity, the latest her visit last year for a fundraising dinner for the Victor Chang Foundation.
I've enjoyed it enormously, thank you very much. Yes.
And the reception's been pretty good, hasn't it?
It has, as all the visits have been.
So now, like Britain, Australia is a nation in mourning.
It removes from the world scene at a very young age a person who had a special fascination for many people around the world.
Events have changed so quickly since the first news of the accident in Paris. Mr Howard still hasn't had a chance to decide if he'll head to London for the Princess's funeral. Opposition leader Kim Beazley's thoughts are with the young royal family.
Our deepest sympathy goes out to her 2 young sons in particular, William and Harry. They will be very much in all our thoughts, all Australian thoughts, I suspect, tonight.
It's devastating news, and we extend our condolences to the family, especially to the young princes.
In Canberra, Jeff Bruce, 7 Nightly News.
Paris has today become the centre of the world's focus as the news broke of Princess Diana's death. 7 News correspondent Tim Stott is in Paris, and we spoke to him a short time ago. Well, Tim, what's been the official reaction in Paris to Diana's death?
I think, like the rest of the world, everyone here, it just hasn't sunk in yet. It's just too unbelievable. It's a very quiet time of year. Parisians are really just starting to greet Sunday now, awaking to this news. Television here is reporting that the bodies of Diana and Dodi Fayed are lying together in a mortuary section of the hospital, the Salpêtrière. It's a specialist centre for surgery and dealing with hemorrhages and that sort of thing. It's understood they worked on Diana for 2 hours there, and that will be very much the focus of attention in Paris today. Already it's becoming something of a shrine. Police are putting up barriers to keep people back. They don't want too much interest. Diana's body will have to be moved quite soon. This has become a state matter for Britain, of course, and French authorities and the British Embassy here are coordinating a military flight. They'll probably get it out sometime today.
Now, the crash scene itself, Tim, is it a particularly dangerous roadway?
Well, people do tend to travel very fast here. The police don't spend a lot of time with radars, etc. in Paris. This is a section by the river where you can get up some speed, and they do. It's interesting, these motorbike paparazzi are really a feature of European life. They don't happen so much in Britain, but they're relentless, and obviously it was a very high-speed occurrence in this tunnel, apparently trying to get away from very high-speed motorbikes.
And those freelance photographers known as the paparazzi are about to get a dose of their own medicine as the world focuses its attention on those who made Diana's life unbearable.
Like no other person on the planet, Diana has been stalked by those with the sharpest of tabloid teeth, the notorious paparazzi. To the Princess of Wales, privacy was just a word. Of all her privileges, it was one thing she never enjoyed.
I never know where a lens is going to be. A normal day would be followed by 4 cars. A normal day would come back to my car and find 6 freelance photographers jumping around me.
In this BBC interview 18 months ago, she told of how the press had evolved from a mere nuisance to something much more sinister.
Now I can't tolerate it because it's become abusive and it's harassment.
Her relationship with Dodi Fayed whipped the paparazzi into a new frenzy, and now Diana has literally been hounded to her death. Her loss has devastated other celebrities. Actor Tom Cruise captured the outrage.
We need laws for what is harassing an individual, and you know, when these people would put price tags on people's heads. If there's a price tag that these people put on, that we will give you X amount of dollars. And I've been in cars with my children and my wife, and even times when I haven't been there, and just our children, and had to drive over to find a police officer and say, look, could you help me?
Always ready with an open checkbook for an exclusive Diana front page, the British press is already undergoing a crisis of conscience. An emotional Andrew Roberts of the London Sunday Times says the paparazzi are virtual killers.
In a way it is assassination, actually. In a way it is assassination.
Well, there will be, I think, a worldwide wave of revulsion and anger.
But not lost on anyone, the sickening irony that the paparazzi will continue to feed off the tragedy they helped create. Adam Malters, 7 Nightly News.
One of the best-known royal watchers is correspondent James Whittaker. While admitting that the whole question of the paparazzi needs to be looked at, he did spring to their defence.
It's the easy way out always for authorities, establishment figures to blame the press. It is the modern way of everything. To me, it isn't the issue, but it's been raised, and so I will answer it. Very recently, in the south of France, in Saint-Tropez, I was present when Diana, Princess of Wales, was aboard one of Mr. Al Fayed's yachts, the Jonquille. I was with 3 other newspapers, 2 other newspapers, there were 3 of us, a total of 6 of us, were circling the Jonquille at a distance, working on long-range lenses, totally known to the princess that we were there. We were circling it when we were boarded by a French military naval police boat. That's fine. But moments after that, the princess specifically posed for another boatload of photographers. They were the French paparazzi. Maybe some of them were on that boat that were actually involved in that pursuit last night through Paris.
Diana's body brought home to Britain as the world mourns the death of a princess. Good evening. The world has spent the day coming to terms with the loss of the best-known woman this century. Disbelief, tears and anger as the realisation set in that Diana is dead. We'll cross now to 7's London reporter Stan Grant. And Stan, needless to say, a day of terrible sorrow across Britain today.
It is indeed, Ross. Britons are going back to work here on Monday morning with the full realisation hitting home now that Princess Diana is no longer with them. That period of grief and disbelief giving way now to mourning as the princess's body arrives back on British soil.
Princess Diana back on British soil, her coffin draped in the royal standard. Pallbearers lifting her body into a car, from there to a private morgue, awaiting details of Diana's funeral. For Prince Charles, the completion of his saddest day, recovering the body of his ex-wife, earlier met by French President Jacques Chirac, a guard of honour leading to a flight that would carry the heaviest of burdens. British Prime Minister Tony Blair, the solemn task of greeting the Prince, flanked by Diana's 2 sisters. Mr Blair himself now facing the challenge of easing a nation's sorrow.
We are today a nation in Britain in a state of shock, in mourning, in grief that is so deeply painful for us.
No one suffering more than Princess Diana's children, Princes William and Harry. Attending church with their father at Balmoral in Scotland, Prince Charles spending the night comforting his sons. Their uncle, Diana's brother Earl Spencer, lashing out at the pressures that he blames for his sister's death.
That I always believed the press would kill her in the end. But not even I could imagine that they would take such a direct hand in her death, as seems to be the case.
Princess Diana's mother, Frances Shan Kidd, is keeping her silence from her village in Scotland. But Diana's stepmother remembers a special person.
I will always remember her tremendous sense of fun and her wonderful gift for friendship.
Princess Diana and her new boyfriend, millionaire Dodi Fayed, were fleeing photographers when their car crashed, killing them both. But the last pictures of the couple, a glimpse of what might have been. Diana seemingly finding happiness at last. But the love that eluded her in life returned 1,000-fold in death. A nation preparing for the funeral of their Queen of Hearts. In London, Stan Grant, 7 Nightly News.
Well, the past 30 hours has seen an extraordinary outpouring of public grief here on the streets of London. Princess Diana's death becoming a lightning rod for pent-up frustration, tears and anger. Her home at Kensington Palace becoming a shrine. Neil Warren reports.
Across the country, churches have been packed. Special services, prayers of remembrance.
May the power and presence of Christ bring to them and to us courage and strength for the days to come.
None more significant than here at St Paul's Cathedral, where Diana was married to Charles 16 years ago. But Kensington Palace has been the focus of the nation's grief. Flowers piled as high as they could go, people from all over Britain. They'll be here for days with their gifts and tears. It's an incredible sight. Hundreds of mourners outside Diana's home, the numbers swelling overnight. A crowd still finding it hard to accept that this has happened. To them, the Princess of the People is irreplaceable.
I love Diana so much. Everybody loves Diana.
Earlier, they wept in disbelief. Buckingham Palace, another gathering place to unload their grief.
She's someone that every young woman probably wanted to be.
There were dozens of Australians.
I guess it's the same as when JFK or those sort of famous people pass away. You always remember where you are and what you were doing.
Harrods was closed. There were flowers and messages of condolence there too, and the flags were at half-mast.
The world has lost a princess who is quite simply irreplaceable. Mr. Al Fayed has lost a much-loved eldest son.
Radio stations shut down out of respect. Newsreaders could barely contain their emotions.
They loved her. She was the people's princess.
But it's the press which is being blamed for hounding Diana to her death. And there's anger on the streets.
You've lost a lovely person for nothing. You're horrible.
And this from one of the princess's best friends, who holidayed with Diana in Greece only 10 days ago.
She was relaxed and very happy and seemed to have found a sort of peace in her life. And it's just a pity that the paparazzi could not give her the space that she so famously asked for.
British celebrities have begun their tributes.
Everybody was amazed to see this butterfly emerge from this chrysalis, this extraordinarily beautiful woman.
But it was Diana's common touch that won over so many hearts. The royals would prefer a more private farewell. They may have to reconsider after this overwhelming outpouring of grief. In London, Neil Warren, 7 Nightly News.
There's already been one funeral, Princess Diana's companion, Dodi Fayed, buried in London overnight. His distraught father, Harrods boss, Mohammed Al Fayed, now vowing to pursue the paparazzi in the courts, the way they pursued his son.
It was a solemn, low-key event, a ceremony at Regent's Park Mosque in London, where Dodi's father, Mohammed, wept quietly beside the coffin. Under Muslim custom, the dead are buried as soon as possible. After the funeral, his body was taken to Brookwood Cemetery near London. Dodi may have been better known in Hollywood than England, producing Chariots of Fire, The World According to Garp, and Hook.
You look beautiful.
But his playboy reputation wasn't publicised until his romantic link with Diana.
par quelques journalistes à moto.
The family's lawyer says Mohammed Al Fayed had started proceedings to stop press intrusion after Dodi and Diana were photographed holidaying off the French coast.
Mr. Al Fayed is quite sure that but for the unwelcome attentions of these people, who I suppose we shall have to call photographers, this tragedy would never have happened.
The civil action is expected to begin as soon as a judicial inquiry starts into the accident. Emma Rossi, 7 Nightly News.
We're now awaiting the confirmation of the details of Princess Diana's funeral. The people here in Britain wanting to say goodbye properly with a full state funeral. Perhaps Princess Diana's family, the Spencer family, wanting something a little more private. We will have an announcement on that from Buckingham Palace within the next 12 hours. Ross, back to you.
Yes, thanks, Stan, for that. We'll keep in touch. That was Stan Grant reporting from London. Well, what began as a chase for a quick snap ended up costing the lives of 3 people. After a quiet dinner, the Princess and Dodi Al Fayed tried to slip away, but they were pursued through the streets of Paris and into a tunnel. At a speed estimated at 180 kilometres an hour, the car crashed into a pylon and overturned. Mr Al Fayed and the driver were killed instantly. The Princess of Wales and a security guard cut out of the wreckage alive. That guard, 29-year-old Trevor Rees-Jones, is now the sole survivor. His account of just what happened critical to laying the blame. But today, the bitterness was clearly directed at the paparazzi.
This is what politicians and celebrities are up against trying to get around Paris. In the choked streets, the motorbike armed with a photographer is impossible to escape. And this in a country with some of the world's toughest privacy laws. Since Saturday night's horrific crash, police have held in custody 7 members of the paparazzi, believed to have been chasing Dodi Fayed's 6-litre Mercedes at speeds of up to 180 kilometres per hour. At the very least, they could be charged with failing to assist at the scene of an accident. A witness we spoke to saw one taking photos of Diana still trapped inside the wrecked vehicle.
The irony and the tragedy and the loss and all of it together, and one says, you know, why?
French magazines are some of the biggest payers. Do they fund this dangerous game? The bosses say no.
It's too bad. I feel sorry they happened here, but it could have happened anywhere, the kind of car chase.
If anyone is charged, they won't have trouble making bail. One good photo of Diana and Dodi could fetch $200,000.
You're just not going to stop this sort of thing happening. The paparazzi know. London isn't the market, Paris isn't the market, the world is the market.
The underpass by the Seine has become an instant landmark in a city of history and beauty. Amid the flowers and sorrow, there's also disgust that this unnecessary tragedy happened here in Paris. They'll remember this place as the site of 2 separate tragedies, that of a princess dead at 36, and the personal tragedy of a woman rebuilding her life, who just wanted to be left alone. Just who is to blame for the death of the princess might be answered by the survivor Trevor Rees-Jones, Dodi's bodyguard. He's still in hospital with head wounds but will soon talk to police. It's ironic that Diana's last interview was to the French newspaper Le Monde just last week. She said she liked France. Here she felt safe. In Paris, Tim Stott, 7 Nightly News.
Well, celebrities say what happened to Diana is a typical and frightening part of their daily lives. Sydney's Nicole Kidman today spoke of the harassment as presidents and prime ministers paid tribute to the princess.
Across the world, there have been both tears and tributes. On footpaths around Los Angeles, they have turned street corners into shrines. Others have simply written their message on the pavement. Of all the cities in the world, Hollywood knows the worst of the paparazzi.
The press, by and large, are fantastic. We're talking about a small renegade group. They're stalkers. They're legalized stalkers.
And Australia's Nicole Kidman has been among those hunted by the packs of photographers.
It makes you very upset. It makes you scared. Obviously, Princess Diana had it a lot worse than anybody else in the world. And for it to result in something like this is just awful.
It's a tragedy which has touched all of America. At the US Open, a moment's silence. Regardless of who's to blame, there is the sad realization that a woman who was emerging as a crusader for so many causes is now gone. And today, that was the focus of tributes from world leaders.
We liked her very much. We admired her work for children, for people with AIDS.
She was undoubtedly one of the best ambassadors of Great Britain.
And from one humanitarian to another,
that she had great love for the poor.
the woman who wanted to be the Queen of Hearts touched thousands in her short public life, but sadly, even more in her death. In the United States, John Vors, 7 Nightly News.
Federal Parliament came to a stop today to remember Princess Diana. Speakers on all sides of politics put aside their differences to express the sense of loss felt across the nation.
This time it was the silence of our politicians that said more than their words. Parliament suspended for an hour as a mark of respect for Princess Diana. Outside, the national flag signifying the same. Our leaders united in their grief and their memories of the Princess's visits to Australia.
She was a person that did capture our imagination. It was not only her style and beauty, it was also her spontaneity, her friendliness, her warmth.
And for an emotional Kim Beazley, her commitment to causes like AIDS.
She was the people's princess, and that is how she will stay.
Earlier, party leaders signed the condolence book at the British High Commission and Government House. And there were messages from ordinary people as well. One entry here at the British High Commission reads, "Peace and happiness to Diana, at last." In Canberra, Glenn Milne, 7 Nightly News.
Well, as the shock subsides and the grieving begins, Sydney-siders are finding solace in prayer. Hundreds have gathered at St Mary's Cathedral to begin mourning a woman whose image and charity is fresh in our memories.
Of all the cities Diana graced, Sydney held a special place in her heart, and the feeling was mutual. To see young faces illuminated by her presence at this Darling Harbour charity lunch last year was to witness the magic of a true princess.
She made herself available to the ordinary public all the time.
And the extraordinary people she inspired to overcome adversity.
She was very cheery when I was talking to her. Very down-to-earth person, I think. Just a regular, natural person that anybody can talk to.
Australia's own celebrities humbled and honoured to share personal moments with the princess.
We were talking about her sons and how proud she was of them, but she also mentioned that they were her best friends in the whole world.
And today, Sydney-siders joined the world in mourning, pouring into St Mary's Cathedral. Within 3 hours of St Mary's announcing the Mass for Diana, more than 500 people had gathered at the cathedral, the size of the congregation at such short notice, reflecting the true depth of Sydney's affection for the late princess.
These events touch unfathomed depths in the lives of every one of us.
She's probably the most loved person in the world, and I don't know, I just thought she would be here forever, and obviously she's not. She's gone now.
It was Sydney's first public farewell to Diana. Others have chosen a more private moment to say goodbye. Adam Walters, 7 Nightly News.
Seven Nightly News with Ann Sanders, live from London.
The driver of Diana's death car drunk at the wheel as the royal family gathers here in London for her funeral. Good evening to you from London. The man who drove the Princess of Wales to her death was drunk. Not just a little, but more than 3 times over the limit. So after 3 days of paparazzi photographers being blamed for Diana's death, tonight there's another reason.
Piecing together just how the princess died has been a slow process for French investigators, but finally a picture is emerging, a combination of bravado, drunk driving, and then a callous disregard for human life by the pursuing paparazzi. Much of the police attention has turned to the driver, 41-year-old Henri Paul. He died instantly in the crash. His blood alcohol level, 0.175, 3.5 times the French legal limit. He wasn't the regular driver. He'd been sent away from the Al Fayed-owned Ritz Hotel as a decoy. But Mr. Paul had consumed the equivalent of 10 whiskies. Diana died at the hands of something she'd campaigned against, a drunken, reckless driver. The Al Fayed family lawyer says the revelations of drink driving changed nothing for those grieving. The press are to blame.
I say that these photographers have committed an offence. It is the offence of an attempt of the violation of private life, and that offence caused what happened later.
A lawyer representing 3 photographers says his clients weren't qualified to give medical help, and as for taking photos...
Taking pictures of an accident is what a photographer does every day. Every day.
The idea was to let Diana and Dodi leave their private dinner in peace, but a lawyer for one of the arrested paparazzi says the former French serviceman had goaded the wait of photographers with the words, "You won't catch us," before speeding off through Paris. The car, an S280 Mercedes, was travelling at 196 kilometres per hour. Its speedo frozen on impact. An American family driving through the Riverside underpass in a taxi says they snapped for 10 minutes as Diana lay dying.
They were doing the close-ups, snapping as many photographs as they could from every conceivable angle.
One for sure I remember because there was just so much action. Literally walked around the police officer and laid on the windshield, right on the windshield of the car, and was taking pictures of which now I think would have been the princess.
I went to the aid of a young woman in the back of the car who turned out to be Lady Diana, but I didn't recognize her immediately. I helped to free her upper respiratory tracts because they were in a position in which you just can't breathe if you're unconscious.
The pendulum of blame has sensationally swung, with police painting a picture of a driver who did absolutely everything wrong. And now lawyers for the paparazzi are on the attack. But these men have almost certainly escaped France's most serious charges, close to murder, as their 48 hours in custody came to its legal end today. As one police officer put it, it takes 2 to play such a dangerous and stupid game. In Paris, Tim Stott, 7 Nightly News.
In New South Wales, a driver with Henri Paul's blood alcohol count would face a $2,000 fine and could go to jail for a year. Causing somebody's death in a crash could mean a manslaughter charge and 25 years in jail. Britain will come to a standstill on Saturday for Diana's funeral, the biggest since wartime leader Winston Churchill's. The royal family is gathering for what they've called a unique farewell for a unique person.
In their thousands, people queued for hours, just for the chance to leave a message, just to say goodbye.
I could have told her before, now, on this occasion, how much we all loved her.
I bought my birthday flowers because it was my birthday last week, and I felt that I wanted to leave them for Diana.
The national sorrow being felt is real. People of all ages and races there to honour a woman they felt cared for them. The Princess of Wales will be buried on Saturday, her funeral not a state one, but what's being called a unique farewell for a unique person. Millions are expected to line London streets as the funeral procession leaves the private royal chapel at St James's Palace, where Diana's body lies. The procession will pass through the city to Westminster Abbey, where a service will be held. There will be the invited guests, but also the people whose lives she touched. Whether Prince Charles will stand among the mourners is uncertain.
If she was still married, then quite clearly Prince Charles would be the chief mourner. I'm not quite sure who the chief mourner will be here.
Sarah Ferguson is heading back to England with the young princesses. She says words can't describe the pain in her heart. And from Diana's former lover, James Hewitt, words of sorrow and despair.
I'd like to say how much I loved and admired Diana.
After the public farewell, privacy at last for the princess's family. Her body will be taken to the Spencer family home in a village northwest of London, where Diana will be buried in a family vault alongside 20 generations of her ancestors. In London, Neil Warren, 7 Nightly News.
And you can see our live coverage from London beginning at 6 p.m. on Saturday. In Canberra today, a service to remember Diana, attended by the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Governor-General. Australia will be represented at Diana's funeral by our High Commissioner. It's unlikely Mr Howard will go. Most messages of sympathy have been directed to Prince William and Prince Harry, but severe criticism for their father, Prince Charles. He's being attacked for not doing enough to help his sons cope with their mother's death.
In the tradition of the British stiff upper lip, Princes William and Harry made a public appearance just hours after being told of their mother's death. Now their father, Prince Charles, is under fire for taking the children to church rather than allowing his sons time to grieve privately.
They must be allowed to express their grief, which might include crying.
By comparison to the conservatism of their father, Diana brought fun to the children's lives. Now even Prince Charles' biographer is chastising the Prince of Wales, demanding the young princes must come first.
I hope he can clear time to be with his sons, who need him more than ever now, and he's got to put them before duty for the foreseeable future.
Well, there's certainly a lot of anger associated with tragic loss, and I rather suspect some of this will be toward their father.
While their loss is greatest, Britain's charities are also reeling from the death of the princess. A princess who thought nothing of reaching out to children with AIDS.
She made AIDS acceptable. She made it something that people would talk openly about.
And angered politicians in her own country by travelling to Angola and Bosnia to call for a worldwide ban on the use of landmines.
She avoided all the officialdom and protocols. She was more concerned about meeting these people and spending time with them.
Princess Diana was able to elevate causes in the public eye like no one before her. The governing body of British charities says she is quite simply irreplaceable. In London, Michael Gleeson, 7 Nightly News.
Almost 1 million magazines were destroyed in Australia because they had paparazzi pictures of Diana. Now publishers can barely print enough about the princess, and the price of almost anything to do with Diana is going up and up.
For 17 years, her face has shone from the covers of billions of magazines. Now, in death, Princess Diana's proving even more popular. Around Australia, editors have rushed to produce special editions honouring our favourite cover girl.
I just want something to remember her by.
Tonight, there's barely a copy left. Woman's Day will print more overnight, but you'll be lucky to find another Vanity Fair.
Our distributor wasn't able to provide us with any stock and actually told us that it was virtually a sellout everywhere.
Australia's leading women's magazine publisher says Diana's death has changed the industry so much, it'll never be the same.
It is going to change the face of magazines. I believe that. You won't see so many of those fuzzy, long lens pictures.
Newspaper sales have skyrocketed since Diana's death, the Sydney Morning Herald selling an extra 100,000 copies in just one day.
I rarely buy the paper, but ever since this happened, I've been buying papers and I know everyone else has too.
Everything Diana touched has turned to gold. Christie says the value of her dresses, auctioned just 2 months ago, is now incalculable. And today in the United States, a Rolls-Royce she once used sold for $70,000 more than its owners expected. Natalie Barr, 7 Nightly News.
And here in London, the Sun newspaper says it sold an extra 1 million copies yesterday. That's 5 million altogether.
They're being described as disgusting. The photographers who chased Diana then stopped to take pictures as she lay dying. The 7 men held since Saturday are free tonight, but facing the possibility of manslaughter charges as the world looks for someone to blame. Here's Tim Stott in Paris.
The cameras from around the world were waiting, but the 7 paparazzi were never sighted at the Palace of Justice. After 2 days in custody, they slipped out quietly, escaping the sort of treatment they dole out for a living. They'd heard a judge tell them they are all officially manslaughter suspects. A magistrate will now decide whether they have a case to answer. This is equivalent to being charged under our system. They'll also be investigated over the so-called Good Samaritan's law, not helping someone in danger. In this case, Princess Diana and her companions lying in the wrecked Mercedes. But a leaked police report suggests they did far more than just not help. It says officers first on the scene encountered strong resistance trying to move them away, and described the gang of snapping photographers as virulent, disgusting, continuing to take pictures and deliberately preventing the police from helping the victims.
And there was one who was not happy, and he said, you can go to Bosnia because I am doing my job here, which is terrible.
The photographers' lawyers are having none of this, saying one tried to take Diana's pulse before taking her picture. Another said his client didn't raise his camera until police arrived. They say it's showbiz justice.
So what he could do more? Nothing.
nothing. So he's a scapegoat.
All 7 men have been released. 2 have been ordered not to take pictures professionally until this lengthy legal process is over. The investigation by police and the magistrate has a long way to go. But they won't be getting much help from the key witness, sole survivor, bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones. It's been revealed today his injuries are worse than first reported. He won't be talking for several weeks. Also entering the legal fray, the family of the dead driver, Dodie Fired's employee Henri Paul. Not satisfied with the police blood test that showed his alcohol reading at .175, they're calling for a fresh independent test. But if a French newspaper report is right, they'll get little joy. It says a second police blood test has already found an even higher reading of .187. That's equivalent to 9 shots of scotch consumed in rapid succession, close to 4 times the legal limit. Paul will probably share the blame for this accident with the band of paparazzi that played with him the deadly game of cat and mouse along the riverbank of Paris. This case has months to run, and it's likely some of the 7 accused will walk free. But by today's legal moves, France is making it clear someone will take the blame for the death of Princess Diana. In Paris, Tim Stott, 7 Nightly News.
Well, we have our communication back with London now, so let's cross to Anne Sanders. Anne?
Thank you, Ross. There are claims tonight that Princess Diana's need for independence contributed to her death. After her divorce, Diana knocked back an offer to use Scotland Yard's Royal Protection Squad, bodyguards that could have saved her life.
When Queen Elizabeth stripped Princess Diana of the title Her Royal Highness 12 months ago, she also left open the possibility that the headstrong princess would relinquish her royal bodyguards. Largely unknown to the public, that's exactly what Diana did.
Diana should not have been allowed to decline this protection. That's my judgment. She would not be dead if she had been protected by the Royal Protection Squad still.
Whenever she travelled with her children, especially the future king, Prince William, the royal security detail was a compulsory item. But without her children, she was also without her guarantee of security. The princess was often seen around London unescorted, and last weekend in Paris, as the world now knows, relied on one of Mohammed Al Fayed's men to drive her, a man who was drunk. Just days earlier, Diana had written to a family half a world away in New Zealand, sharing their grief at losing 2 family members at the hands of a drunk driver.
I am thinking of you so much at this difficult time. Big kisses and lots of love. Diana.
In a bitter irony, the note arrived the day after her own death, the same way. In London, Michael Gleeson, 7 Nightly News.
It's an image that will stay in people's hearts a lifetime. Prince William and Prince Harry will walk behind their mother's coffin. The boys will have their father and uncle there to support them on the long march to Westminster Abbey. Prince William says he wants to be there for his mum, as do millions of people who didn't even know her.
3 days to go before Diana's funeral, and St James's Palace, where her body lies, has become the gathering point for mourners, preparing for their final farewell.
There's not going to be anybody else that will ever replace her.
Very kind, loving lady, and we all loved her, and we regret that she's died.
Some become impatient as they queue to pay their respects.
She's just jumping ahead talking.
Emotions are still simmering over the loss of their princess.
Press go away.
The majority wait silently, preparing for their chance to sign the palace condolence books, among them Australian tourists.
I've never seen anything like this in my life. It's just absolutely phenomenal.
It's taken some of these people up to 9 hours to make their way inside, and it'll be like this for the rest of the week. Condolences also on the internet, where Australia is 3rd behind the United States and Britain, with a number of messages sent on the Buckingham Palace website. After leaving St James's, the funeral procession will take the path of royal and political landmarks, down the Mall through the Horse Guards to Whitehall and then Westminster Abbey. But there are fears of a crush, with up to 2 million people expected to pack the streets. No concerns from church leaders, though. They're promising a service fit for a princess.
As you say, someone who is 36 represents a whole generation which will be particularly stunned by her death.
Outside the Abbey, construction of barricades and podiums has begun, the streets transformed ahead of Saturday's service. A 1-minute silence will be observed, stores will be closed and sporting events have been postponed. There's been confirmation of a Diana Memorial Fund, details yet to be finalised, but the Princess's charities are the likely beneficiaries.
It seems an appropriate thing to do at this time. Obviously, we're still shocked at the loss.
It was left to Prince Charles to formally identify his former wife's body today, and from the royal hideaway at Balmoral, the first signs of movement. Prince Andrew left the property. The boys, William and Harry, are being comforted by an old rival of their mother, their former nanny, Tiggy Legberg, who, apart from Diana, is the woman the young princes love the most. In London, Neil Warren, 7 Nightly News.
The tiny English village Diana once called home is set to become an international shrine to the princess. Already the town is being swamped by people wanting to see her final resting place.
Great Brington, an English postcard village largely unheard of, but about to become internationally unforgettable. This is the place Diana grew up and the place she'll be laid to rest.
The people from Northampton, they're pleased she's come home.
The population here is just 150. Today, clutching flowers, fighting tears, they queued at the chapel where she'll be buried, describing Saturday as a homecoming.
I think it's the best place for her to come. It's where her dad is, and it's what he would want.
And history agrees. 20 generations of her family lay here.
That's right. It is her ancestral home, and it is the mausoleum for her family.
You can see the Althorpe estate, Diana's family home, from the church. It's just a kilometre away. And today it too became another place for Britons to congregate in their hundreds and pay their quiet respects. This is the estate in a state of grief. The flow of mourners hasn't stopped. The queue of cars surrounds the property. The town besieged.
I've seen people travelling here by taxi, by bus, by car, literally from all over the country.
The people round here knew Diana personally, like this local shopkeeper.
She used to pop in for chocolate
and 76-year-old Betty Andrew, Diana's family housekeeper.
She was just a typical teenager. She liked swimming and dancing, and she used to come in the kitchen and help me do cooking.
They'll all be among the grieving on Saturday, a day that will be as much theirs as Diana's. In Great Brington, Chris Reason, 7 Nightly News.
Across Australia, florists say they're overwhelmed by orders being sent to London. At British consulates in capital cities, hundreds have queued to write a final message to farewell the Princess of Wales.
In London, the flowers continue to mount. Hundreds sent from Australia.
This has been an extraordinary response from the general public. I don't think we've seen any other response like it for a public figure.
British consulates around Australia have been overwhelmed by the crowds.
Such a tragic loss. I've never mourned a public figure. I don't, like I have on this occasion.
The British appreciating Australia's remembrance of the magic of Diana.
I think her ability to touch everyone from the highest to the lowest.
In Brisbane, thousands mourned for the Princess of Wales.
Commending into God's gracious keeping the souls of those whose lives are now ended.
Others had special personal memories.
Even at school, always being fun-loving and always a bit of devilment.
In Sydney, signs of bitterness.
From billboards to burning candles to signing books, Australians are searching for ways to express their grief.
This group from suburban Sydney is on its way to England to bid Diana a final farewell.
And I feel we're in debt to her in a big way.
Damien Smith, 7 Nightly News.
Seven Nightly News with Ann Sanders, live from London.
The power of the people pushes the royal family to show some emotion at the loss of the Princess of Wales, as one of the men who chased Diana tells why he wasn't to blame. Good evening to you from London, where the royal family is under attack. Mourners outraged at a perceived lack of sympathy from the palace, in particular Queen Elizabeth. On the streets there's anger as well as tears. People wondering why their monarch is offering no words of comfort.
It would have been so simple to hoist Buckingham Palace's flag to half-mast. But it didn't happen with the Queen out of town in Balmoral. The British public is furious.
Well, they're just saying it all, what they thought of her, aren't they, the royal family?
This is the thing.
Well, I think it's quite disgusting myself. They should have that flag flying at half-mast.
The palace has been very mean to Princess Diana, our queen, and they are mean to her when she is dead.
It wasn't the palace, but Mohammed Al Fayed, Dodi's father, who came to the rescue today. His company, Harrods, providing much-needed free food for mourners. The growing outcry has prompted the palace to extend the route of the funeral procession to avoid a crush. Diana is going home one last time to Kensington Palace, leaving from there instead of St James's Palace, her coffin on a gun carriage. Princes William and Harry likely to walk behind. They'll now follow a path through Hyde Park, past Buckingham Palace, then link up with the original route to Westminster Abbey, 4 times the distance. As many as 3 million people are expected to turn out onto London's streets to say goodbye. The biggest event of its kind in London's history.
All our energies are now directed towards trying to make this as tremendous a commemoration of Princess Diana as possible, to make sure that we involve as many people as possible.
Today, Diana's mother, Frances Shan Kidd, released a statement on her daughter's death. "Thank God for the gift of Diana," she said, "and for all her loving and giving." The only response so far from the palace, this from Prince Charles's press secretary.
All the royal family, especially the Prince of Wales and Prince William and Prince Harry, are taking strength from this overwhelming public support that they are sharing in their sense of loss and grief.
The British anger at the royal family's stony silence has reinforced one fact at least, that even if Britons are no longer in love with the institution, they're still in love with the individual, Diana. In London, Michael Gleeson, 7 Nightly News.
But you know, most of the people who have queued for those long hours are happy just to be here. They simply want to get their chance to say goodbye. The queue was said to be an English invention, but even London has rarely seen queues like these. They've been coming for 3 days now, and still the lines keep growing. The wait now up to 11 hours to sign the condolence books at St James's Palace.
I hope that your kindness is never lost. Lots of love from Ben Taylor.
May your love shine forever, Rosemary.
It's been cool and sometimes showery, but these people don't seem to mind. One man told me the rain was like tears for Diana. Whole families, including young children, stand all day and all night. Complete strangers strike up friendships. They come from all over London, Britain, and the world.
There's an element of companionship amongst the public have come together under the one cause.
The condolence books will remain open at least until the eve of Diana's funeral. No one's sure what will be done with them, but people feel it doesn't matter what you write or whether it's read, just as long as you cared enough to be there. Diana and Dodi Fayed may have been about to announce their engagement. Reports out of France claim Diana was wearing a $280,000 ring given to her by Dodi on the night she died. Today, for the first time, one of the photographers involved in the fatal chase has told of what he saw and did moments after the crash. Our reporter Tim Stott is in Paris.
It was to be a special meal at the Ritz Hotel on Saturday. Diana, dining privately with Dodi, was handed a ring. He'd bought it in Paris that very day. The Fayed-owned hotel is now being used as a base to attack the paparazzi, widely blamed for the accident. But after 4 days' silence, the Diana 7, as they're being called, are giving their side of the story. Ramald Rat was the man seen with his hand through the window of the wrecked Mercedes. He says he was taking Diana's pulse.
I saw Princess Diana, who was seated on the floor with her back towards me. I told her in English not to worry, that I was here to help. The firemen were coming. That's it.
But did he take photos?
No, not at all. Not at all. It was not really a time to take photos. I stepped back and then I resumed my work as a journalist. And I took some very wide shots of the car.
His version a total contrast to the police account. It tells the photographers stopping them from getting to the dying. Already dead at that stage, the drunk, speeding driver Henri Paul. This photo was taken 3 years ago. Neighbours have told of his lust for the party lifestyle. This is him with Dodie on the very day of the crash. His boss knew nothing of his life of lies. Paul was never the Air Force captain he claimed to be, and he certainly wasn't a chauffeur.
Monsieur Paul had a standard driving licence which was sufficient to the purpose for driving that car with passengers on that evening.
But the hire company has confirmed the vehicle had a silver strip on its number plate, just like this one, and therefore was legally to be driven only by someone who'd passed a tough driving and character test. So while London is solemnly preparing for Saturday's funeral, Paris is witnessing a grubby game of claim and counterclaim. In this city of style and class, it's also undignified. The man to end this slanging match is bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones. This is him leaving Sardinia on the day of the crash. The injuries to his head and jaw are so bad he might never talk again. His family visited him in the Paris hospital today, as police acknowledged it will be weeks before he can provide even a written statement. In Paris, Tim Stott, 7 Nightly News.
Just as the tabloids here try to distance themselves from blame for Diana's death, news of a plan to eavesdrop on royal mourners at the funeral. The Royal National Institute for the Deaf says it's been approached by some newspapers for lip readers to find out what members of the royal family say to each other at the ceremony. And a strong defence of the actions of the paparazzi from an Australian photographer working with the pack in London. One-time Sydney snapper Andrew Murray says the world's reaction has been unwarranted and unfair.
Their photos made Diana the world's most famous woman, and while many have loved the work of the paparazzis, few have loved them.
Oh, I've been photographing Diana for about 8 years.
Andrew Murray, the only Australian photographer in London's paparazzi pack, says there was just one reason his colleagues chased Diana on Saturday.
You know, we've all got bills to pay and mortgages, so you've got to earn the money somehow.
You know his work. This photo of Charles and Di's last kiss, these front pages from the world's biggest magazines. And his justification is simple. They get the fame, he gets the cash.
Basically, yeah, it's the money.
Is it good money?
It's excellent money.
Murray's world is his car.
It's my second home.
In here, all the tools of the trade, the long lens cameras, a ladder, a computer that develops his shots. He says no one can criticise his behaviour.
We give the story to a magazine and they run it and the public buy it. So everyone is to blame.
And the ultimate irony, while the paparazzi may have been involved in the death of Diana, that death may now result in the demise of the paparazzi. With Diana gone, so is the work.
It's put a slight dent in the market, yeah.
They may have to wait some time for the market to pick up.
There is always Prince William with his girlfriends.
In London, Chris Reason, 7 Nightly News.
Seven Nightly News with Ann Sanders, live from London.
The royal family shows its private pain to the British public as the Queen prepares to at last offer her people some words of comfort. Good evening to you from Buckingham Palace in London. After days of criticism, the royal family has broken with protocol to show the people how much they care about Diana. Prince Charles stood by his sons as they prayed for their mother at a private service at Balmoral. And the Queen, stung by criticism, will address the nation in the early hours of tomorrow, Sydney time. But many of her heartbroken subjects say it's just too little too late.
A prince in the image of his mother, but lost in a world without her. William, head bowed, took the first steps into the public eye since Princess Diana's death. It was a solemn family moment. The royals breaking the shield of privacy to attend church at Balmoral in Scotland. Here the kind words of a grieving world offered comfort. They don't mourn alone. With the whir of cameras piercing the silence, Prince Harry struggled with his emotions, solace found in the hand of his father. At all times, the Queen watching over her young grandsons. The visit unexpected, but a hint when security descended on the small church. A church closed sign, another clue. Then the palace press secretary.
This is not in answer to criticism. This is a family going to church for private prayers.
In London, Princes Edward and Andrew walking among the people, a grieving nation, but an unforgiving one.
I would say that the public support for Diana has overwhelmed the palace.
You know, I think they probably could have got out amongst the people
and talked a bit earlier.
Like, all the people of this world loved her, and like, it's just so late. I mean, they've done nothing, you know.
As the princes entered the gates of Buckingham Palace, Prince Charles plunged into another controversy. He won't be involved in the official funeral service.
They're going to be damned if they do and damned if they don't. If Prince Charles got up and said anything, read any lesson, there'd be plenty of people saying, what a hypocrite, made her life miserable during her lifetime, how dare he stand up now.
As anger continues to grow over the silence from Buckingham Palace, the Queen has agreed to address the nation, a move she hopes will show that the royal family too shares the public grief.
The Queen has asked me to say that the royal family have been hurt by suggestions that they are indifferent to the country's sorrow at the tragic death of the Princess of Wales. The Princess was a much-loved national figure, but she was also a mother whose sons miss her deeply.
Today, Prince Charles and his sons fly to London for the saddest of duties. Future days will see smiles return to young faces when time and a father's love teaches how to heal. In London, Stan Grant, 7 Nightly News.
The service for the Princess will weave together all aspects of her life, work and passions. The congregation to be filled with famous faces and those of the ordinary people whose lives she touched. Diana's close friend, Elton John, will sing a special tribute.
We all saw Diana comfort Elton John. It's one of his greatest songs, written about another fallen icon, Marilyn Monroe, but now he's rewritten the lyrics. It no longer starts with Goodbye Norma Jean, but Goodbye England's Rose. The funeral will be littered with the stars of pop and fashion. George Michael arrived today, Sting and Phil Collins will follow. But the list of unofficial guests will be longest. These people have been camping outside Westminster Abbey for days.
We just wanted to be up here, be part of all of it, rather than staying at home. There's more atmosphere here.
To say goodbye to the lady now, because she's a wonderful lady.
The details of what they'll actually see were finalised today. Diana's family will arrive at 7:35, the royal family 10 minutes later. But we won't see anything of them inside. The cameras won't be allowed to film the grieving families.
But what makes it different is the actual service and the nature of the service. That's very special.
We will see her two sisters read poems for Diana and her brother Earl Spencer offer the tribute many had expected Charles to deliver. There'll be 1,900 official guests inside this abbey and millions more people cramming the streets of London outside, all to be watched by a massive 2.5 billion people internationally. That is half the world's population. The broadcast will go to 187 countries. It will be the BBC's biggest ever. 100 cameras, 200 technicians, tons of scaffolding.
Oh yes, we're always ready. We've got to be.
It will be the most public of private funerals. This nation's farewell captured in the words of Elton John. Goodbye England's Rose, from a country lost without your soul. In London, Chris Reason, 7 Nightly News.
The prospect of unprecedented crowds has forced the funeral procession to be brought forward 2 hours to 6 o'clock tomorrow evening Sydney time. Security's tight, 27,000 police on the streets. I followed the route that will pass millions of mourners and places familiar to many Australians. This will be the starting point of Diana's final journey, Kensington Palace, once her home, now swamped by floral tributes. Her coffin will be carried on a gun carriage, escorted by mounted police. Down Palace Avenue, onto Kensington High Street, and along Carriage Road on the south side of Hyde Park. The procession next passes Buckingham Palace, just metres from the balcony where Charles and Diana exchanged that wedding kiss in 1981, a picture of hopeful happiness. Then down the Mall and past St James's Palace, still surrounded by thousands waiting to sign books of condolence. There they'll be joined by the walking party drawn from some of the 500 charities supported by the Princess. A right into Horse Guards Road and through Horse Guards Parade, then into Whitehall, past Downing Street, Parliament Square and finally Westminster Abbey, burial place of kings, heroes and poets, and which on Saturday will become the focus of one of the saddest days in this nation's history. Well, we've seen people queued outside the gates of St James's Palace every day since Diana's death. At least 30,000 people waiting to write a simple message of sympathy in the 43 condolence books. Today, our reporter Michael Gleeson joined the queue to find out what made it so special.
It may be a queue which seems never-ending, but there'll be no arguments in Britain. It's a line worth joining. Why were all these people here? The time is 2 p.m. I meet Mike Martin, a paraplegic whose life was saved 10 years ago by an Australian surgeon.
To think of spending 4, 5, 10 hours here is not a problem. We owe it to the girl, we owe it to her sons.
4 o'clock. Kalpesh Patel teaches disadvantaged children.
Coffee, thanks.
Sally Priest met both men for the first time today. By 7 p.m, they're the best of friends. At times, the queue hardly seems to move, but inexplicably, time passes quickly. How long do you think we are from the end?
I think about 40 minutes.
40 minutes? At 9:30 p.m, the end was in sight.
We've enjoyed the day, the hours have gone quickly, but right now I am feeling a little bit nervous.
I'm actually starting to shake a little bit, I think. It's sort of, after all this time, it's not really sort of hit me.
At 10 p.m, it was us at the head of Diana's queue.
Well, this is it, eh?
Yep, this is it.
At last, the three of us, all strangers half a day earlier, walked together to effectively pay our respects to a woman we'd never met, but felt as though we all knew. Are you glad you came?
Oh, absolutely glad I came, yeah. I wouldn't have missed it at all. I'd do it again.
So after 8.5 hours, thanks to Diana, I've made 3 new friends, and my very private, personal message is written. At St James's Palace in London, Michael Gleeson, 7 Nightly News.
An Italian magazine is planning to print pictures of Princess Diana as she lay dying after the Paris car crash. The publisher says readers have a right to see them and has no qualms about breaking the taboos over the controversial pictures. And today, even more details have emerged of how Diana and Dodi may have been planning their future in the minutes before they died.
It was called a friendship ring. Dodi Fayed bought it for Diana on Saturday at this exclusive jeweller's in Paris and gave it to her at dinner hours before they both died. He was said to have told the salesperson the $275,000 piece was for the woman he'd spent his life with. The jewellers have issued a telling no comment, rich in detail.
Repossi Jewels has no comments regarding the news coming from the source of an insurance company that he delivered a diamond ring to Mr. Dodi Fayed in Paris on the 30th of August.
Today, 3 more paparazzi who've been hunted by police gave themselves up in Paris. They're now facing the same judicial investigation as the 7 already being investigated for manslaughter charges. The world continues to mourn, but French interest in this story has dropped dramatically in the past 24 hours. It's as if they're trying to forget that in this tragedy, they provided the setting, the plot, and too many of the players. As a courtesy to the British government, detectives from Scotland Yard have been invited across the channel to observe the French investigation. They could be here some time. Authorities are in no hurry to conclude this case.
Good afternoon, I'm Ross Simons. Here at Channel 7, we've had an overwhelming number of calls today for us to replay the Queen's speech. So we'll be doing that in a moment, before crossing live to London for 7 Nightly News and, of course, the funeral of Diana, Princess of Wales. But before that, we'll be having a look at the extraordinary events of the past 24 hours. Literally, tens of thousands, possibly millions of people are gathered on the streets of central London, all wanting to be a part of the final tribute to Diana. And of course, there's been the moving scenes of the Queen and the young princes on the streets of London, meeting mourners and thanking them for their words of support. And earlier today, the Queen bowed to public pressure, sharing her family's grief with a country deep in mourning. The Queen had been heavily criticised during the week for not returning to Buckingham Palace earlier, instead choosing to comfort Prince Charles and Princes William and Harry in private at Balmoral. But now, her rare television address is being considered one of the most defining moments in her 45-year reign.
Another break with tradition, the Queen's speech live on television, laying to rest days of criticism and years of claims that Diana was never welcome.
So what I say to you now, as your Queen and as a grandmother, I say from my heart. First, I want to pay tribute to Diana myself. She was an exceptional and gifted human being.
This was what the nation was waiting for, the royals back in London sharing their grief. In a show of courage and strength, Princes William and Harry joined their father outside Kensington Palace to receive the condolences of a caring crowd.
William.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
They accepted floral tributes and read the sympathy cards. There were a few signs of tears, but their heads were held high. William smiling at times, one person in the crowd yelling, "Your mother will live on. You look so much like her." Friendly hands reaching out, the people's princes responding.
And I shook his hand and then I got all tearful. I couldn't say anything.
Yeah, I shook his hand and I said, you know, they'll always be in our thoughts and in our prayers, and that comes from the bottom of our heart.
At Buckingham and St James's Palaces, the Queen and Prince Philip mixed with the masses, the Queen stunned by an overwhelming response from mourners. Her critics silenced, most now convinced the time spent at the royals' Balmoral estate was simply the family's grieving process. The city is already at a standstill. Hundreds of thousands have gathered, camping overnight, the only chance of reserving a place.
This is a unique event, as has been said before, and estimates range from anything from 1 million to 6 million people. Whatever numbers we get here, we're confident that we can deal with them.
Elton John has arrived and spent the day rehearsing his rewritten version of Candle in the Wind. Diana's coffin was moved from St James's Square to Kensington Palace, a slow journey parting a sea of mourners, an indication of the crowds expected for the funeral.
At first, Diana's family wanted her laid to rest in the family vault, near the father she loved so dearly. But plans have changed. Instead, Diana will be buried on an island in a small lake at the family home at Althorpe, north of London. That way, they'll be able to look after Diana's final resting place, and Princes William and Harry will be able to visit their mother's grave in private.
For the shyest of princesses, at least the final stages of today's funeral will be private. Any chance of getting through?
No, it's closed for the vehicle access.
And a change of plans for Diana's burial site. She'll now rest on the family estate, buried on an island in the middle of a lake. The land secretly consecrated this week to make it a Christian burial site.
I think it is very unusual. I would say it is almost unique, in my experience certainly, but clearly in this very extraordinary case it is exactly the right thing to do.
She was to have been interred beside her father in the Spencer family vault in the local church. But the family worried it could turn this sleepy village into another Graceland. In this place where she was so loved, there are mixed reactions.
I'm not sure how Diana herself would feel, because she was very, very, very fond of her father.
At least she'll be safe on Althorpe grounds, and she'll be able to rest in peace.
But one person, Bridget Barford, a housekeeper at the Spencer mansion, thinks it's a mistake.
I keep seeing her as all alone in the middle of the lake.
But at least once a year, Diana's public will be able to make a pilgrimage to the lake, the time to be decided by the Spencer family. Her grave will be adjacent to a stand of oak trees which she planted with Princes William and Harry, a private place where the children will be able to visit their mother in peace. In Great Brington, Michael Gleeson, 7 Nightly News.
Beautiful place. Well, the grief felt by Britons is also being felt here in Australia. Princess Diana's admirers and supporters have packed church services everywhere, crying openly, offering flowers for Diana and lighting candles in her honour. Even fans at major sporting events stopped to pay tribute to the People's Princess.
Sydney's St Andrew's Cathedral was overflowing an hour before the service began. Clutching flowers and cards, 1,200 people crammed inside. Another 1,000 stood in the cold, watching Diana's Sydney farewell on television screens. They came to remember the princess everyone somehow felt close to.
She touched, she hugged, she showed so many in so many different ways that she understood their suffering and their isolation and their pain.
One by one, for nearly 40 minutes, they made their way to the front of the cathedral to offer flowers in her memory. At Perth's St George Cathedral, yellow flowers were laid, symbolising Diana's compassion for the underprivileged. Another 2,000 people at Melbourne's farewell were told Diana was a fairy tale princess. She'd lived many of our hopes and dreams. Sporting events around the nation stopped for players and fans to pay their respects. At the Sydney Western Bulldogs match at the MCG, a minute's silence. Natalie Barr, 7 Nightly News.
There've been startling new images today of the last few moments in the lives of the Princess and Dodi Al Fayed. The Al Fayed family has released the hotel security video, hoping to dispel claims their driver was drunk.
Diana, Princess of Wales, and Dodi Fayed arrive at the Ritz Hotel in Paris for dinner. Photographers are there to greet them, but are kept at bay by security staff who escort the couple into the foyer. Mohammed Al Fayed reportedly didn't want to release this security video, but felt it was necessary to counter what he said were misleading allegations that had been made. Allegations that the driver of the car in which the princess died, Henri Paul, here pulling up at the hotel in his Mini, was drunk. Mr Al Fayed's staff claim this footage shows a man steady on his feet and clearly sober. They say all those pictured with him have given evidence backing that view.
Hotel security stopped the...
At a news conference at Harrods, a senior forensic scientist who spent 2 days in Paris at the request of the Al Fayeds said the pathologist's report suggesting Mr Paul had drunk excessive amounts of alcohol was not reliable.
In my view, given that Mr Paul died a violent death with extensive internal injuries, the possibility of contamination of the blood is a real one and must be seriously considered.
Journalists were told that Mohammed Al Fayed would dedicate the proceeds of an auction of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor's collection and £5 million either to charities supported by the princess or to set up a children's hospital. His spokesman also said he'd been authorised to give a few details of what he said was the sincere relationship between the princess and Dodi Fayed.
The princess also gave to Dodi a pair of cufflinks. They were the last gift she had received from her father, the late Earl Spencer. She said that she knew that it would give him joy to know they were in such safe and special hands.
The couple are pictured here at the back exit of the Ritz just before leaving on their final journey. The Al Fayeds say there's no sign of photographers as the car pulls away slowly, but a large crowd is waiting at the front. This afternoon, Dodi's father, Mohammed Al Fayed, made his first public appearance since the tragedy, greeting the crowds gathered outside his store to thank them for their support.
Diana's funeral is being beamed around the world to billions of viewers. This is how CNN's Brent Sadler is reporting the historic event.
We saw people camping out in their thousands overnight, braving the chill air, sleeping under blankets, some of them under plastic sheets and in sleeping bags, waiting to get prime positions outside Westminster Abbey. We can smell the scent of the flowers drifting across the streets behind us. Behind Westminster Abbey there is Parliament Square, where in about an hour and a half from now we should see the beginnings of the funeral cortege reaching this part of town. Now, speaking to people overnight, it's quite clear that they feel magnetised to this spot here today. Britain has been completely obsessed with what has happened to Princess Diana, to the car crash in Paris and the aftermath, indeed the whole investigation into what caused the smash and the build-up to this funeral. As I talk to you now, crowds are still piling into this area. They're lining up all along the processional route. In some places they're 20 or 30 deep. It's getting so difficult to move behind now that people are having to squeeze shoulder to shoulder to try and get past each other. I've actually seen some...
Brent Sadler. As I said earlier, we received a lot of calls here today asking for a full replay of the Queen's message. So we'll play that now, and then at 5:30 we'll be joining the 7 News team in London for the funeral of Princess Diana.
Since last Sunday's dreadful news, we have seen throughout Britain and around the world an overwhelming expression of sadness at Diana's death. We have all been trying in our different ways to cope. It is not easy to express a sense of loss, since the initial shock is often succeeded by a mixture of other feelings: disbelief, incomprehension, anger, and concern for those who remain. We have all felt those emotions in these last few days. So what I say to you now, as your Queen and as a grandmother, I say from my heart. First, I want to pay tribute to Diana myself. She was an exceptional and gifted human being. In good times and bad, she never lost her capacity to smile and laugh, nor to inspire others with her warmth and kindness. I admired and respected her for her energy and commitment to others, and especially for her devotion to her 2 boys. This week at Balmoral, we have all been trying to help William and Harry come to terms with the devastating loss that they and the rest of us have suffered. No one who knew Diana will ever forget her. Millions of others who never met her, but felt they knew her, will remember her. I, for one, believe there are lessons to be drawn from her life and from the extraordinary and moving reaction to her death. I share in your determination to cherish her memory. This is also an opportunity for me, on behalf of my family, and especially Prince Charles and William and Harry, to thank all of you who have brought flowers, sent messages, and paid your respects in so many ways to a remarkable person. These acts of kindness have been a huge source of help and comfort. Our thoughts are also with Diana's family and the families of those who died with her. I know that they too have drawn strength from what has happened since last weekend, as they seek to heal their sorrow and then to face the future without a loved one. I hope that tomorrow we can all, wherever we are, join in expressing our grief at Diana's loss and gratitude for her all too short life. It is a chance to show to the whole world the British nation united in grief and respect. May those who died rest in peace, and may we, each and every one of us, thank God for someone who made many, many people happy.
Stay with us now as we begin our coverage live from London of Diana's funeral. Farewell.
Seven Nightly News with Ann Sanders and David Johnston, live from London.
An ocean of tears as tens of thousands gather to farewell a princess.
Mourners reach out to Princes Harry and William with words of support.
And another sad loss, Mother Teresa dead at 87. Good evening to you from London. It's 8:30 in the morning here and already the city's streets are packed. Hundreds of thousands are waiting to farewell Diana, the people's princess.
They've been gathering here for days. Tens of thousands waited all night, rugged up against the cold, for their chance to pay their last respects.
In just over half an hour, the funeral procession will begin, taking Diana's coffin from Kensington Palace to Westminster Abbey.
It'll be carried on a gun carriage escorted by a military party and mounted police. The palace hasn't said yet whether the young princes will walk behind Diana's coffin.
Last night, tears flowed freely as Diana's coffin was driven from St James Palace to Kensington Palace ahead of today's funeral. Mourners stood and watched in silence. Some threw flowers, others saluted.
A princess back in the arms of her people. Diana's coffin on the first stage of its slow journey home, moved from its resting place at St James Palace to her former residence, Kensington Palace. Hundreds of thousands lining the streets, a moving display of public mourning, the sombre mood broken only by applause as it passed Buckingham Palace. Escorting the coffin, Prince Charles and his sons William and Harry, earlier sharing what's being called one last private and precious moment with their mother. Waiting for them, Kensington Palace staff, the saddest homecoming. All week they've waited, patiently, grief blind to colour, race, creed or age. The first few wreaths growing to a remembrance garden at the royal palaces. Cards putting into words the pain in their hearts. Queues outside St James Palace stretching for up to 12 hours. One last chance to sign books of condolence.
It's just in a compulsion that you've just got to be here to sign the book.
She's touched everyone's hearts, even people like myself that have never met her.
Millions are converging on London, many coming by train adorned in flowers, carriages often trebled to meet demand. Last-minute building to accommodate news organisations, television crews from around the world taking Diana's funeral to an audience of more than 2 billion people. And security a big concern, 27,000 London police on duty. On the eve of the funeral, a special Catholic remembrance service. Diana's mother, Frances Shan Kidd, and her 2 sisters saying a quiet goodbye. Outside Westminster Abbey, mourners camping out, a vigil to remember their candle in the wind. Not even rain dampening their affection. Diana's body will leave Kensington Palace on this gun carriage, escorted by 12 officers from her regiment and over 500 representatives from Diana's many charities. 1,900 official guests will fill the Abbey, many millions more outside. Inside, singer Elton John, today rehearsing his special tribute with Prime Minister Tony Blair and wife Cherie.
Unlike past funerals at Westminster Abbey, there'll be no fanfare, no pomp and ceremony, just a private service for a very public person. A nation's final farewell. In London, Stan Grant, 7 Nightly News.
The Queen has been on television telling us all how her family shares the grief over Diana's death. The Queen's also spoken directly to the people on the streets of London, accepting flowers on Diana's behalf. And Diana's sons have been meeting mourners too, thanking them for their words of support.
Charles, shut up. Charles.
They'd wanted this moment all week.
William.
Thank you so much. Thank you. An impromptu walkabout from Charles, Harry and William, the formality gone, hidden emotions on display. And each of them greeted with overwhelming sympathy. Hands of friendship reached out to the princes, and neither was in a hurry to leave.
I shook his hand and then I got all tearful. I couldn't say anything.
And William came next to him and I told him that we were so sorry for him.
The Queen and Prince Philip also arrived back in the capital. They too headed straight for the crowds outside Buckingham Palace. Those she spoke to said she had tears in her eyes throughout. These were moments long overdue, moments some had waited patiently for, but most had angrily demanded. And it didn't stop there. Another gesture from Her Majesty, a television address a nation had longed for.
So what I say to you now, as your Queen and as a grandmother, I say from my heart. First, I want to pay tribute to Diana myself. She was an exceptional and gifted human being.
Behind her, the crowd outside, hanging on each and every word she delivered.
It is not easy to express the sense of loss, since the initial shock is often succeeded by a mixture of other feelings. This week at Balmoral, we have all been trying to help William and Harry come to terms with the devastating loss that they and the rest of us have suffered.
The question of public support for the royals may well now have been settled.
Judging by the people who were around me and their comments, we're, pleased she's back and we feel better now.
It's fantastic to see her back at home. Believe me,
all the nation's forgetting it now.
All of it showed that after a week of sticking to time-honoured protocols, finally, the royal family were ignoring tradition. Slowly and reluctantly, the British monarchy are breaking with the past. In London, Chris Reason, 7 Nightly News.
Security cameras have provided the world with the last pictures of Diana and Dodi Fayed at the Ritz Hotel in Paris last Saturday. They were released by Dodi's father, who believes they provide new evidence that the driver of the limousine was not drunk.
The final images of Dodi and Diana alive, his arm around her in easy and relaxed fashion. These stutter-frame pictures come from the Ritz Hotel in Paris. They were recorded minutes before they both died. With the approval of Diana's family, Dodi's father, Mohammed Al Fayed, has released these images to bolster his version of what happened last Saturday night. The paparazzi cameras flash as they enter the hotel. And this is the limousine driver, Henri Paul, arriving for work. His easy walking proof, says the Harrods Empire, that he wasn't drunk. Pointing to a conspiracy by French police, a professor was hired to denounce the official .175 alcohol reading.
In my view, given that Mr. Paul died a violent death with extensive internal injuries, the possibility of contamination of the blood is a real one and must be seriously considered.
And intimate details about Dodi and Diana's short but whirlwind relationship. On top of Dodi's ring, a Harrods spokesman says Diana had given Dodi a pair of cufflinks. They were the final gift from her late father.
She said that she knew that it would give him joy to know they were in such safe and special hands.
Mohammed Al Fayed today accepted the condolences of those gathered at his London store. It's a scene of pilgrimage that's been going on since the tragedy, day and night. Having accepted criticism over the accident, this must make the grieving father feel that much better. And the Harrods boss has pledged more than $12 million to build the Princess of Wales Children's Hospital, a working memorial she would have heartily approved of. In London, Tim Stott, 7 Nightly News.
Seven Nightly News with Ann Sanders, live from London.
Massive public support for Earl Spencer's controversial eulogy for Diana. India orders a state funeral as tears flow for Mother Teresa. And Australia's Pat Rafter cruises through to the final of the US Open. Good evening to you from Buckingham Palace, where a storm is brewing over Earl Spencer's eulogy for Diana. Charles Spencer used his sister's funeral to renew his attack on the paparazzi and, more sensationally, challenged the royal family's hold over Diana's sons. This report from Neil Warren in London.
Diana's funeral stopped the world, but it was her brother who stole the attention, choosing Westminster Abbey as the stage to attack the royals.
Diana was the very essence of compassion, of duty, of style, of beauty. Someone with a natural nobility who was classless and who proved in the last year that she needed no royal title to continue to generate her particular brand of magic.
A direct jibe at the decision to drop Diana's royal title after the divorce. Then a plea not to let his sister down by allowing William and Harry to become too royal.
So that their souls are not simply immersed by duty and tradition, but can sing openly as he planned.
It was to have been a tribute to Diana, but this was a statement. Earl Charles Spencer, well aware of the global audience, also launched into the paparazzi for the second time this week.
I don't think she ever understood why her genuinely good intentions were sneered at by the media, why there appeared to be a permanent quest on their behalf to bring her down. It is baffling.
An extraordinary speech met by an extraordinary response. The applause from the hundreds of thousands watching on TV screens outside, contagious, spreading to the guests inside.
I wanted to clap, but you don't do on a solemn occasion. But to my amazement, the clapping and applause from outside hit the door, went through the door, straight up the aisle to Diana herself.
In London, Neil Warren, 7 Nightly News.
Despite the controversy, or perhaps because of it, there was no doubt in the minds of the billions who watched Diana's funeral that this was a fitting tribute for an extraordinary woman. Chris Reason looks back at the event watched and shared by half the world.
It was never sure they'd do this. They did, and they did it with dignity. 4 princes, William, Harry, Charles and Philip, joined Diana's brother to follow her horse-drawn coffin to Westminster Abbey. The young princes never cried. They were composed throughout, before the gaze of millions, the sort of composure the watching crowd simply couldn't match. And on top of her coffin, a tribute from her boys.
The remains of Diana, Princess of Wales, leaving her home for the last time.
As they neared Buckingham Palace, the royal family walked through the gates, a collective show of respect for the shy girl who went on to outshine them all. Their heads bowed as the gun carriage rolled past. The procession's wake was growing. At St James's Palace, it gathered more than 500 mourners, all from Diana's 110 charities. And another crowd was waiting at Westminster Abbey. Pavarotti, Elton and George, Hillary, Kissinger, Attenborough and our Clive. Then family, the Queen, followed from the car by a frail Queen Mother. The Spencer family arrived, and that of Diana's companion, Dodi Fayed.
I stand before you today, the representative of a family in grief.
So began that controversial tribute from Diana's brother Earl Spencer. It left him close to breaking.
Above all, we give thanks for the life of a woman. I'm so proud to be able to call my sister.
Then, from emotional words to the most powerful of songs.
Goodbye, England's rose. May you ever grow in our hearts. You are the grace that placed yourselves.
One of the world's greatest showmen offered his tribute. Only by sobbing. The grief felt here today is more profound than anything this country can remember, and everyone agrees this day confirms Diana's destiny as one of the enduring icons of the 20th century.
Your candles burned out long before your legend ever will.
In London, Chris Reason, 7 Nightly News.
While the Westminster Abbey service was a very public farewell to Diana, it was in the privacy of her family estate that she was laid to rest, and her sons, Princes William and Harry, said their final goodbye. Reporter Michael Gleeson followed Diana's body home to Northamptonshire.
Her family going to the Spencer ancestral home by train, Diana set out for her final resting place by road alone. But it soon became apparent she was travelling with all of Britain.
And for the most part, it's lilies.
For kilometre upon kilometre, her hearse was showered with floral tributes as this most upright of countries continued to let its long-suppressed emotions overflow. She was heading for Althorpe in Northamptonshire, to the house of her childhood, to an island on a lake where once she had planted trees with her children. The road to the Spencer family home is one Diana has travelled many times before, first as a child, then as a princess. But for the people here, this is the hardest journey of them all.
It's just deep inside your heart that you feel you owe it to them.
It's like losing a sister, like losing any relative.
For some of these people near Althorpe, She had been a neighbour, a childhood friend, a familiar face, long before she was the world's most famous one.
Thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory.
Then, almost as suddenly as she had been thrust into the world spotlight, Diana, Princess of Wales, was gone. Fittingly, away from the bright lights and the glare of the cameras. In Northamptonshire, Michael Gleeson, 7 Nightly News.
Diana was the people's princess, and this was the people's tribute to her. About 1 million of them crammed the streets of London to pay their respects. Our reporter Tim Stott was among them.
They'd waited 3 chilly nights to get a good spot along the funeral route. These girls from all over Australia had arrived at 2 in the morning to make sure they were part of this sombre moment in history.
I heard so much about her. She's been, I guess, part of our lives for the last 15 years.
It was a tragedy, wasn't it? Yeah. Seems like, yeah, like she never really found happiness, so it was sad.
Organisers were prepared for an outpouring of emotion never seen before. The tissues were free, handed out in their thousands. Police had catered for 1 million people lining the way to Westminster Abbey. They had no trouble getting there. The shopping streets were empty, traders keeping their doors closed as a mark of respect. The unity of this action reflecting a nation's shared grief. For those Australians who'd waited so long, the passing of the flag-draped coffin brought only numbness. The disbelief of Diana's death finally shattered by the reality of the horse-drawn carriage before them.
It was quiet and there was just an emptiness, I guess. Everybody seemed to be the same way.
There were no stiff upper lips. The crying was uncontrolled. This moment was simply so sad. Westminster Abbey was invitation only, but everyone was invited to the live broadcast on huge video screens in Hyde Park. They turned up in their thousands. This is the People's Service, relaxed on the grass at Hyde Park. It reflects the sort of informal approach which Diana had made her trademark. In London, Tim Stott, 7 Nightly News.
The BBC has estimated that more than 2 billion people watched Diana's funeral around the world. In Australia, city streets were deserted as many people joined the global mourning. For the funeral of Diana, Princess of Wales.
Last night, we were a nation in mourning.
I want to say my last goodbyes to Diana.
Over 2 million Sydney-siders watched the telecast wherever they could.
And in cities across Australia, it was all quiet. There were few people on the streets, cinema attendance down, and the restaurants near empty.
Even police reported a quiet night.
Police radio is quiet. We're hardly responding to any jobs at the moment, and it's just unbelievable.
Those that went out so they weren't alone.
I felt like being with people that I could sort of share it a bit with. Yeah.
And if we weren't watching the funeral, Australians still found a way to say farewell.
I'd like to dedicate the song to her. Got myself into some trouble tonight. Guess I'm just feeling blue.
Sonia Wilkes, 7 Nightly News.